is the one tasked with physically going out and putting a value on every commercial and residential property in the township. So welcome, Lori, if you come up to the podium.
Good evening. I was here a couple weeks ago for a meeting, and there seemed to be a lot of concerns in this proposed development if people that stayed in their homes, if the taxes would increase for them. So I brought in some information tonight to put everyone's mind at ease in our village, in our community. Before you are two printouts of a residential property located at 1324 Marietta Avenue. It's directly across the street from Heritage Square, which is another newer development over the years. There's some houses there. They are surrounded by commercial property. And I wanted to give copies of 2015 payable 16, 2016 payable 17. Their tax bill. The assessed value stayed exactly the same. The exemptions are exactly the same. They're not being assessed as commercial property. These houses are not. They are residential. Now, if you notice, the tax bill went up, and that is due to the tax rate increase, which is what I don't do. There's even a pie chart in the back where the money went to, how our rate went up a little this year. So I just, again, want to reiterate that the assessed value has stayed the same. I only went 2 years. I've been here now for two quadrennial assessments where I have to look at every piece of property and revalue them. And this house is still residential, not commercial. Does that explain things better for you? So you can see an example,
Right.
actual example here in our village.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
All right, next we have the residential housing program and Home in the Heights continued. So I'm going to ask Mr. Fick to set this up, and we'll turn it over to Steve Klein, who is our TIF consultant. So Matt, would you?
Hey, sure.
Again,
Thank you,
please.
Mr. Mayor. So at our departmental meeting a couple weeks ago, Katie Kim came and presented a plan that she's been working on to acquire homes in an area on the east side of Prospect along Samuel between Prospect and Constantine with the goal of demolishing these houses and then building back a number of brownstones. So it'd be essentially doubling the density, going from maybe 36 homes to 72 conceptually. But the EAV and the price point of these would be such that, it would kind of it would establish a new market in the Heights, and that's why it was of interest to the board to at least listen to it. It kind of provides the 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that this community is missing. It addresses, as one of the speakers said earlier, some of the rental issues that we've been dealing with, and it was of enough interest that we wanted to have this is why this meeting is tonight, to talk about this, to talk about the TIF boundaries, to see if this is something that the community supports, if this is something that our board supports. So Mayor Phelan asked that we have a special meeting to encourage more dialogue among everyone, which is, again, why we're here tonight. And if there's other information besides that, maybe Steve can answer those questions.
Yeah, Mr. Klein, if you come forward, please, and then we'll go to you last, Katie, so you can give us a synopsis of what you're proposing. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. And Matt, I'm not sure what happened to her.
On PowerPoint with him.
I didn't have a PowerPoint. It's just the aerial. There we go.
Okay.
There you are.
So, Steve, if you tell us all who you are and a little bit about your background, please, and then your presentation.
Steve Klein, I'm the president, CEO of the Economic Development Group in Bloomington, Illinois. And in conjunction with our companion law firm, which is Jacob & Klein, a different Klein from me, we provide administrative services to the village of Peoria Heights on matters relating to their establishment and annual administration of their tax increment financing districts. And I'm going to take, if I can, just a minute here. I want to address a couple of things that I heard earlier, and we can, I think we all need to understand that I'm here to take notes tonight because there's a lot of process that has to occur yet before the village is in a position to make a decision about establishing another TIF area. And as Administrator Fick was just describing to you, tonight is to get your input and to be thinking about areas that would benefit by being included in a redevelopment project area in a TIF district. The village undertook a process in 2014 and finished in 2015. It was a good 8 or 9 month long process to establish 2 other TIF districts here in the Heights. One is going to be adjacent to the area that they're going to be talking about tonight, and another small area is down on War Memorial Drive, kind of over towards Wisconsin Avenue and then back this way a bit. And in both cases, there's a statutory process that requires about a 6 to 8 month long series of steps that the village undertakes. And as the board is aware, there's a substantial amount of analysis that is done during that time, in addition to other public hearings and meetings and interaction with the public. The village will put together a TIF redevelopment plan, as it did for the other TIF districts that it has, and in that plan is included an impact analysis on other taxing bodies, as well as forecasted amounts of real estate tax increment that the village would be likely to generate if certain projects were to be undertaken and new private investment occurred within the area that is defined as the TIF district. None of that has been done at this point for the area that the board is looking at tonight. And so you're here at the very, very beginning stages of this discussion. One other thing is that there's actually 2 proposals for the area. The village has already approved an inducement resolution for the apartment building that was proposed, which is going to be west of Prospect on the north side of Duryea. Is it Duryea? Yes. And then the second proposal has to do with some residential redevelopment that would be on the east side of Prospect along the Samuel Avenue corridor. Those are the 2 projects that have been discussed. Only the apartment project has there actually been a preliminary application, and anything that has progressed as far as the possibility of beginning a negotiation for a redevelopment agreement at some point if the area is included in a TIF. The other project, we have not gotten that far yet. So, and as the mayor indicated, the village is open for business. It is quite open to receiving any and all ideas or proposals for other redevelopment projects, where they would be commercial or residential in nature. And again, that's part of the reason why they're having this meeting, is to try to get the word out so that you're aware that they're undertaking this effort to see if there are some new things that the village could consider doing here. With regard to the, and I promise I won't go through a TIF 101 here, but because they know I can talk too long for that. The taxes themselves within a TIF district are not frozen. The whole concept behind tax increment financing is that there has to be an increase in the assessed valuation of property over or during the time of the life of the TIF district that results in an increase in a property's tax bill, and that increase in the tax bill is temporarily captured by the village in a special TIF fund, and those dollars then can be used for both public or private TIF eligible project costs. And those costs can include public infrastructure, or they could include eligible expenses that might be reimbursed directly to a private developer, but again, for statutorily approved types of expenses that the money can be used for. So it's very much a limited and controlled source of funds that the village would have available. Among the public side of the expenditures would also then include any intergovernmental agreements that the village would have with other taxing bodies, such as the school district, to address their impacts and provide funds each year. So, long way to go. A lot more discussion to be had, and I think that the board's charge tonight is to really talk about some of the specific areas that it feels would benefit if the village were inclined to create another area, TIF area, and then once we've kind of identified those pieces or those neighborhoods or blocks or however you want to go about it, we'll look at sewing it together at some point later, and the area has to be eventually, ultimately, it has to be a contiguous boundary. It has to be a contiguous perimeter boundary, and the area as a whole needs to meet or exceed the minimum requirements of the Act in order to be designated as a TIF district. And again, in the plan, then, there would be details about the types of projects that the village would use the TIF and why they would be incentivizing different things will be described and all discussed within the TIF plan. If you're interested in those, TIF 1, TIF 2, TIF 3 plan, or the Lisi Pabst Cohen Warehouse area is in a TIF district that was established in 2008. Those plans are all on file here with the village, and you can take a look at any of those at your leisure.
Thank you, Steve. All right, welcome, Katie. If you would come forward, please, and describe your plan, your proposal.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, just because of the number of people here, kind of go over a little bit of what we talked about, developmental meeting, and kind of how we got to this point. If that's all right with all you guys, everyone? Okay. So we started, when we started working with the Trefskers project, we actually started talking with the school districts up front, first and foremost, and talked with them about creating that TIF. And at that time, talking with Dr. Heath, the superintendent, is that he shed light on a couple different issues that the school has in terms of the transient population and renters, and about the the stable home ownership. And that really got me kind of thinking about Peoria Heights, and then as the Home in the Heights project became available, and a lot of the research was done by the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council, a lot of the data and the demographics and the statistics of home ownership in the Heights came out, and to me it was very shocking because going out visiting my grandma in the Heights, you always went down the corridor and you saw all the, the beautiful stores, and I remember going to Smith's Drugstore and, all the wonderful homes on Grandview Drive. However, the study really gave really good insight into the amount of poverty that we do have in Peoria Heights and the home ownership that we have. And based on the data that the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council produced, we have a higher percentage of poverty than the city of Peoria does, per their statistics. And now that they're spread over a wider area and we have a dense area. But it started to get me looking at then the housing supply and at what age do people start moving out of Peoria Heights. And there is a drastic increase of people moving out of the Heights in a range of years 25 to 29. And if you think about what's going on at that point in time, they're looking to have kids, start a family, get in the school district, and they move out because we don't have a housing supply. The Greater Peoria EDC also put together statistics and data on the housing supply we have. A lot of the houses were built during the time of Pabst with the factories here for the factory workers as well. So they are, 1 to 2 bedrooms with 1 bath. If there's a 3-bedroom, more than likely it's a 3-bedroom, 1 bath. And so, right now for our current economy, a lot of families want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house if they have some kids. And so that's when you see them, they move out of the Heights. Not that they want to. They love the walkability. They love the character, from Well, Ms. Stevenson said this earlier, is all the reasons that they want to still stay in the Heights is the character, the architecture that we have, the different variety of stores and shops. Oleo and Vino with their beautiful patio in the back area, I think is a well-kept secret in Peoria Heights. And the shops and the walkability, Grandview Drive, all the aspects that we have in the Heights is really, it's amazing. We are a very urban city in a village, and it's all the reasons why we personally wanted to live here. And this project really grew out of looking at more houses than I can probably even count in the Heights for us personally to relocate and live here. And when we started to go into a house and we'd see this cute Cape Cod, and it'd be 3 bedrooms and the bathrooms in the basement, and we have 2 young kids, it just wouldn't work. And frustrated wise, my husband was like, he's like, well, by the time we put the money into the house, it's never going to appraise for what it's worth because the cost of construction's too high. And then there's no comps in the area, so you can't get a bank loan because there's no comparables because there hasn't been any development. And so those roadblocks really have stopped us. And we went in this one beautiful house on Kelly, and I just got frustrated, and I said, what do we need to do? I said, buy the whole block so you change the comps. And jokingly, my husband said, is that possible? And so we started looking at blocks that you could potentially do that on. The area that we picked out is along Samuel Avenue from Prospect to Constantine. It is the most densely populated with renter-owned homes in Peoria Heights. It also has great bookends to build off of. It has Glen Avenue, which has good ratio of home ownership. It has Prospect Avenue, which has that commercial corridor, and it has Constantine, like the Constantine Beach, Grandview Drive area. So it is a stable area to create a catalyst to then encourage more buyers and homeowners to develop. And by creating a density of a group of homes, we solve a lot of the development problems. So one, we create our own comparables because we're going to be building these and then selling them. So we create our own market. So we'll have those comparables so the appraisals will be able to come in. We also create safety and confidence, if you will, more so confidence that people can come into this community and invest in their homes and expand their homes, and that they will have those opportunities around them to raise their kids together and to grow their families here and stay in the Heights. That is what personally we started with this project to do, and it is, I always say it's a selfish agenda for this development because we want to grow our family in the Heights. We want to raise our family in the Heights. My husband just got the pleasure to move into a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house, and so we're hoping that our marriage still goes for the year. But we did actually kind of feel the pain, and we said we can't really understand what people are feeling in the Heights unless we're here. So we did purchase and have moved into the Heights, and we are living along Samuel. And a lot of the homeowners that we went and talked to, we've started this process with sending a letter out to say we are interested in purchasing your home, and basically we'd like to sit down and talk with you. We have gotten responses from a lot of the residents. We've sat and talked with a lot of the residents and told them what we're going to do. One, to be a good neighbor, first and foremost, and we're really open with our developments in general. If somebody wants to come and ask us what questions, if we don't have a confidentiality agreement with our clients, we will share as much as we possibly can with you on that one-on-one meeting. And so we sat down, we told them what we were looking to do, and some of the needs in our community were also some of the older couples that have lived in this community for many years, and one of them was afraid that we were going to be pushing them out of the neighborhood. And I said, absolutely not. I said, one, we can't make you sell your house, and two, all the reasons you love Peoria Heights is why we want to do this. And really, the third one, it kind of let me listen to what they needed as a growing population, and every house in the Heights has stairs. I mean, I haven't been in one house that does not have stairs in it, whether going up to the front door or within. And so as the older population doesn't want to move out of the house, there's not a lot of supply for them. And so in a couple of the areas where the lot sizes are smaller, we're looking at doing condo flats so that they can stay in the Heights and they don't have stairs and they have that different supply. So we really want to meet the needs of the community, and I would not be here presenting this right now if it wasn't for the other project that has already gotten approved for the TIF inducement resolution, because we don't have all the details ironed out. However, it truly is a but for the TIF, this project can't happen, because the new construction rates would put a home roughly at about $350 to $425 by the time you purchase the lot, demo the building, put a new house in, and you're not going to hit the market. We're not going to be able to sell it. We just won't. I mean, that's data. We can show it. You can come in our office. We'll sit down. We'll show you the quotes. But leveraging the TIF and the incentives that brings and the benefits, and then also leveraging the Home in the Heights program, which to me is a wonderful asset that the Heights has for development. It was a program that was put in place last October where somebody can either use it towards down payment assistance, or they can use it for rehab. And basically it is a county loan, 6 years, 0% interest, 15% of your project cost, or up to $20,000. And there's no income restrictions. And to me, I was breathing a breath of fresh air when it got passed, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect storm. Like, this is exactly what we need to get those young couples into our village in order to be able to get them into home ownership and build their family here. And really, to me, it's sad that nobody's taken advantage of this program, and it's been in place for 6 months, over 6 months. And so one of the things we started looking at is, why aren't people taking advantage of this program? Is it too hard? Is it too complicated? Is it daunting? And basically looking at and talking with some of the banks, we said if we can kind of streamline that application process for them and help them out as part of our development deal, would they be on board with kind of having us assist them in putting all the paperwork and all the forms together? And they agreed. They said absolutely, that'd probably be one of the best ways to get people motivated. So that program, pending TIF resolution, pending TIF inducement, and pending the TIF getting created and us being able to go forward with the project, that is something that we are definitely going to be offering to our potential buyers, is that assistance, because there's no income requirements. And I can't say that enough, because every time you look at a home buyer, first-time home buyer, or low income requirements, there's always an income requirement. And a lot of our population in the Heights is just over that. So we just barely can't qualify. This is open to everybody. I mean, it's open to you now to take advantage of. And so we would work with that program to also implement that in our sales, to really help those families that want to stay in the Heights, and maybe they can make the monthly payment on the loan, but they don't have enough of the down payment accumulated because of college debt, multiple reasons. I don't know the waiver-based personal, but it's a great opportunity. It's a great stepping stone, and I really want to see our community be that pilot and leverage all the data that is available with it, and in essence stabilize one of, like I said, the most densely populated renter block. We also were looking as well, one of my passions, and if you've heard me talk about development in the Heights in this area, you've heard me talk about the Prospect Corridor. And as we look at, we have a solid anchor with Junction City at the end of Prospect, and then we have I call it their culinary corridor here, and then going down to the zoo, and then you have it go right into OSF and Unity Point. It's the little historic bluff you kind of turn on the right. And so now, since we've relocated our business as well here in the Heights, drive down Prospect often, and pretty much it's the only way I go downtown now. And really, making that corridor healthy, so business workers downtown, or when we bring clients in to wine and dine them, coming up that Prospect corridor, staying here in the Heights, or going to Junction City, I mean, that's where a lot of the business meetings are happening, and so we want to make that strong and solid, so when people come and look at our community, it's stable and it's their perception. And in thinking that, we are evaluating some of the houses that are in very good condition structurally to relocate them to some of the city-owned lots up on that bluff corridor. So where we would be able to keep those houses that have a lot of character that we cannot rebuild at this point in time. And I know to Mrs. Stevenson's point as well is, again, the character and the architecture. I'm a big believer of you can't fake historical, and it really looks bad when we do it, but we need to keep the character, absolutely. And so the floor plans that we're pricing out and putting in our budgets have that garden level basement to keep with the character and the architecture of the Heights. You'll have the first couple steps up on them, 2 stories, and the mix of the Cape Cod and the different textures and materials. We will, again, pending all of the approvals that we need, we will have a planned unit development in place where it has a certain requirement for the facade. And again, that would only be for new homes, so we can make sure that we keep the quality and get it on the right track for what we want to do.
Well, Katie, you've done a great job. You've proven that you can do a good job. This sounds like a very great project. And can you just give your opinion on what could be the tax adversity to the people outside? Has that been considered? The people that are outside of the TIF district over the time of the TIF? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and we've had a lot of residents from Grandview Drive have called us, and a lot of residents from Glen Avenue have called us and met with us. And I know when we talked about, you made a great presentation at the departmental meeting about the taxes, and really, and I think as you stated again tonight, the 2 ways to increase your home value is either to do an improvement, you increase it, or to sell it at a higher rate, and then that next person pays that value. Usually when you talk about over term of the whole year of the TIF, it really then, you have to also look at a lot of the other factors. What's the economy doing? How are we stabilizing the area? And I think the way people, I don't want to say short it or cause a potential decline, is when they don't have those planned unit developments, when you don't have a plan going into it. Back in, don't quote me on the dates, but I can't remember when, like the Moss Avenue Bradley Homeowners Association started, creating the revolving loan fund to start purchasing homes that were historical and renovated. And I know I've talked with a couple of the members of that homeowners association, and they have data of property values not stabilizing, but staying consistent in that level because of the efforts that community has made. And knowing that would be something amazing to have in this community as well, to be honest, and I would work with anybody in the community that would want to form that, because I think that that's a great way to keep some of the really precious, Cape Cods and the bungalows that we have here that have that culture, but not being able to solve every problem with one development. And I mean, it's taken months to go and individually meet with the owners and negotiate the lands that we have under contract right now, and we're still working on it. But as you know, with development, there's a certain amount of soft cost to any development, and being able to spread those over a dense area helps lower those costs down and spread it out. And so that's really why the density is important, as well as the confidence in the market. We haven't done any marketing. We've kept this very quiet. And like I said, the only reason we're coming out right now is because the other project got approved for the inducement resolution, and they're starting to discuss, do we expand the TIF or do we, we create a new one? And so we wanted to make sure that this project was considered for the TIF because we need it. I mean, I've run the numbers. I'd love to sit down with you and run the numbers as well in case I'm missing something, but yeah.
It really does. I mean, it looks excellent, and not just from outside of the TIF district. Just want to make sure that the people that are regulating the Heights, I mean, our taxes have gone up so much, with some good result, but not, not. Just want to make sure that the increased taxes that come out of this are used correctly.
Properly, yeah.
That's really the concern. But this is a great plan. I applaud you. It's a good job.
Thank you.
It's like a really good plan.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure that, that we really put the study together, make sure that it's viable, make sure that we don't get stuck with a bunch of vacancies and stuff like that. Make sure that it's good stewardship of the funds that have been raised by people all over that live in the Heights. And then, as the other projects have proven, they've been good. But, we need to all be protected as these developments occur. As a lot of us have been around here paying higher and higher property taxes, and we also want to see that capped off at some.
Yeah.
That I hope is also considered.
And I think that that's a great point when you bring up as the taxes have gone up, because again, as we've looked at multiple houses, I mean, there's a couple houses that are half the size of our old house in Dunlap, and they're more taxes. And it's just like, wow, but it's also a small village. And if you look at the whole rate that we have to pay, having more supply would also help share that burden and that cost. And if you also think about the residents that are in here, right? So say you have 20 families, 4 people in the family, they eat out 3 times a week, then you times that by 52. I mean, look at the sales tax that would be going into our community as well, which helps the village, and it helps put that money back into our infrastructure and helps make them more financially healthy. I know that the state has right now on discussion a property rate freeze. Now that means the rate would freeze, but if the value of the home goes up, then that will be adjusted accordingly. But that rate freeze is, I'm told, more than likely going to be a pass. So, but yeah, for that reason as well, we look at getting that density.
What would the price range do you feel like of the houses would sell for, like low to high?
Yeah.
What are you expecting?
Yep, and the point real quick that you said last time is vacancy, and that is something that right now we want to be very careful with, because we have multiple phases in this project, and we would not create spec homes. I want to make sure everybody's very firm on that. We would not create spec homes. We would basically sell with a design build. I mean, they would be custom built to whatever that homeowner wanted, and we would step into that. So we wouldn't have any of that, and we would leave the homes that we've purchased right now as rentals. I mean, that's what they are. They would remain that way. And then price range rise, it really is going to depend on how that's developed and how it's designed out the house. We are shooting for the target market of $250 to $325. And a lot of that comes from the demographics in the Heights, where there's a huge gap. And then also, if you look at the PAR statistics and what's selling and how the houses are moving, we want to hit a market. We want to hit that demand. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, I want to live in the Heights, but I can't find anything. And I said, what do you want? I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And if you talk with a lot of the residential agents, we've surveyed them as well and saying, okay, are we hitting the right supply? Is it a 2-bedroom, 2-bath? And they said, if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, we could fill it all day long. And so that's what the data is telling us. That's what our subject matter experts in the real estate community are telling us. So that's what we're targeting. We also, just for another purpose, and again, this is my husband, is he wants a 4-car garage versus a 2-car garage, so those options would be available as well. So.
Okay, so trustees, any questions for the developer? All
I'm sorry
right.
to keep my back to you guys, but.
Thank you, Katie.
Kinda hurt.
Steve, is there anything you want to circle back and cover that wasn't covered in your?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so we will move on. We would be at old business. I'm sorry, we'd be at new business. Board, actually, we have a discussion of the TIF boundaries first, and in consulting with Mr. Fick, that really doesn't make sense. We should probably talk about the inducement resolution first, and if that doesn't pass, then talk about the TIF boundaries. So,
We do that, Brian.
yeah, we'll get to that. So, if there's no objection, let's vary from the normal order of business here and get to the inducement resolution. And before we talk about that, Trustee Harn, is there, since you have property in this proposed developers area, is there anything you want to state first, sir?
Yes, I would like to state that I will be removing, I have one property for sure in the TIF, in the proposed TIF, and possibly two, depending how far the TIF goes. So the property that is for sure in the TIF, I would like to state I will be removing it from the TIF district. So it won't be, that property will not be available for TIF funds, and that way I don't have any conflict of interest. And if the other property is in the TIF as well, I'll remove it also.
So in Ms. Kim's proposed development, you have a property and you're requesting that if the inducement resolution passes, that you are requesting that your properties be drawn out of the TIF?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Only because I want to avoid any conflict of interest.
Thank you, okay. All right. So we would be at proposed tax increment financing district redevelopment project inducement resolution, the Kim Group LLC. Trustee Mariscal?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2017-07, an inducement resolution for a proposed tax increment financing district redevelopment project.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Gadd. All right, sir, you're up. Mr. Mariscal?
Thank you, Mayor. For the purpose of residential development, Resolution 2017-07 seeks to either expand the boundaries of TIF District 1, also known as the Lacey-Pabst TIF District, or to include within a proposed new TIF district select parcels located on Samuel, Columbus, and Constantine Avenues, as well as a single parcel located on Prospect Road. The developer, the Kim Group, intends to construct up to 38 new homes, all of which would have a minimum of 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and would be in keeping with the existing architectural style of the neighborhood, with similar setbacks from the street with walk-up entrances, and also be densely spaced. Approval of this resolution would signify good faith effort by the village to carry out the aforementioned, and would also allow for future TIF eligible costs to be reimbursed, without which the developer contends the project would not be feasible. Thank you.
Okay, we're open for discussion. Trustees? Trustee Harn?
My only concern is the infrastructure. Have we had any engineers coming up to check to make sure that our storm drains and our sewers can handle the increased volume of water that will be placed on them?
That's a good point. I share some of the same concerns. I've asked Mr. Fick to look into this, so Matt, you want to take a shot at that question?
And I might kick the ball over to Director Smith here in a minute, but I know those are things that after the inducement resolution, if it is passed, that the Kim Group will undertake those studies at their expense, which is why they need this inducement resolution, so again, they can track costs and get them reimbursed. But they do need to happen. There's, again, kind of like setting up the TIF, there's several processes to go through before we would sign off on, the demolition of these homes and construction of new ones. The PUD, so this will be a planned unit development essentially, which is kind of akin to a special use, if you remember what those were, where, we can set conditions on a lot of different things. It actually gives us a lot more flexibility than if it was a straight subdivision process that we would go through. So there can be bonding requirements, there's engineering studies that we can require. I can't answer your question tonight, but just know moving forward that those are all items that will be addressed, but we can't address them tonight.
Okay. Director Smith, is there anything you would add or would like to request at this point, sir?
I don't think there's anything specifically to add, other than to just say we're just not far enough along yet. And I don't think we're even at the point yet where we don't know what we don't know. And that's kind of, as Steve alluded to, this is very much just the jumping off point tonight. But the village would need to be very careful, and I'm sure the engineers would agree, Steve would agree. Obviously with any redevelopment agreement, there's going to have to be very specific language in there that We need to have engineering studies on the water system. The sanitary district is going to want to see studies as far as their pipes are concerned. There's going to need to be stormwater studies. And I just don't think we know yet. I mean, we may find out the storm system very well can't handle it and that we need to look at some type of retention or detention system. So I think all options are going to be on the table. But at the end of the day, yes, the village and the existing residents and the new residents, they certainly can't be left in a worse condition than they are now. And certainly the village shouldn't be responsible for these improvements, but for this development going through, we wouldn't be making these improvements. So I think we're going to have to be very careful and very specific with the development agreement to make sure that language is in there so that the village and its existing citizens get those protections.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Harn, you still have the floor, so go ahead with your questions or comments.
That was really my biggest concern, and maybe I'm voicing that too early in the discussion of everything, but sooner or later it had to come up, so why
No,
not
I don't
sooner?
think you are. You're making a very good point, because I think a good process will deliver us a good product, and we want to make very certain that we scrutinize this proposal and get all the questions answered that we have.
Yeah, I'm sure our sewers and storm drains were put in probably the 30s, 40s, 50s, so did they have this planned ahead when they engineered the sizes of the pipes and things like that? So we'll find out. We'll have some studies done. We'll get some answers.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that was all.
Who else? Any other trustees?
I have a question, because he brought up the storm drains, but what we talked about in the departmental meeting, what about the people that live there now that have kids? And you purchase the rental property, because I'm assuming majority of the houses on there are rental? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, so the majority of the places there are rental, and those rental that have kids, I'm assuming they go to the Peoria Heights. They're not at a private school where I'm coming from is I'm scared that when we do this development and we get this $250,000, $325,000 home that people are going to be able to afford to purchase are not going to send their kids to Peoria Heights. They're going to send them to a private school. So we don't get those kids. So those kids that are currently in those homes, where are we putting them? Are we going to tell them, hey, leave, you got to go? I'm not for that.
Katie, would you mind coming to the podium, please, just for a second? I'm going to set this up for you, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I asked you to put in writing in a letter to us that you and I have talked extensively, and you listed in your letter that you are committed to working with us without adding additional cost or delaying your development, to work with us to do a couple things. One, to help identify reputable landlords in the area where we could help people who are renting right now who might be displaced to find other opportunities to live in Peoria Heights, and two, to work with us to help us purchase from you homes that you might have set for demolition where the village might be interested in purchasing those homes and moving them to other lots to help foster an opportunity for middle-income homeowners to become homeowners. Am I summarizing our discussion correctly?
Correct, and a couple points to add to that. We also have talked with Janice Parker at Navicor, who actually was very instrumental in helping the current renters in the East Bluff when Lisk went in there and did housing. She got their credit rating up to a point where they could buy home ownerships, and I would say sadly, but on a good note, the project that was delayed on the construction side, but all these individuals got their credit scores up, and they were actually able to purchase homes, not the ones that were being built, but they were able to purchase homes in the area. So it was actually a great success story that we've already had in our community. And so we've asked Janice that if somebody is interested in her services as they're currently renting, that we would be able to offer her name and her card and her brochure and stuff like that. There are to address your question, couple of your questions. Right now, again, we're early on. We still have to go through planning. We still have a lot of steps. I mean, it's a development project. There's lots of places that this could fall apart. You know, I don't even want to go down all of them right now. However, our plan would be that if the kids are there are some houses that homeowners are selling and they're moving to other areas. So we can locate them into, say, a phase 2 or phase 3 house as a renter as well, to keep them on the block. I mean, that is first and foremost option. One, because we're going to be owning those houses. But then two, we talked about having a list of landlords and other buildings, other houses in the area that they could go and they could rent for as well, to those houses. And then the third one is they could definitely relocate to where the houses would be relocated. They could also buy a house there. I mean, sometimes the down payment is an initial entry to barrier. I mean, 20% down is a lot for people to save up, especially with a lot of the debt structures that we have in place right now with, you know, college and working. The house that we bought, it was a young couple that just had a kid and they want to get out of here because of the school district. And so I can't project, and nobody can project, that the families that move into this block wouldn't send their kids there. I mean, I can't say they would, I can't say they wouldn't. I mean, I just can't say that because I don't know who they are yet. But I also know that there is a lot of talk with some of the residents that are in this area, and talking with a lot of the individuals, even from on Grandview Drive and on Miller and on Glen, that have said, you know, if we all teamed and said, hey, we're all going to send our kids to Peoria Heights, you know, that would totally change that school. You know, and I heard somebody, to even quote them, said that could be our new Trier of Peoria area. And so it's a choice. And that's something, if you start getting more stable housing and stable families into the area that's not moving around every year or two, it gives, again, confidence in the market and confidence to make that change. And I would say from the more millennial generation, you know, a lot of them are living in Peoria Public School District, right now, and they're saying, you know, we want to make this a better place. And I think you're going to see that shift with the younger families. So that's what we were doing. And then also with the ones we can't relocate, a lot of the rentals are on a month right now. So anybody with families, we would adjust the construction time frame and the construction scope and schedule, so where we would be able to end the school year, give them a chance to move out, and then start construction on those homes.
Okay.
If we weren't able to relocate them at their, you know, again, a mutually agreeable relocation with them.
Okay, and I have another question. So the houses that you're purchasing, I mean, do you know how many of them actually have kids that live there? I mean, does every one of them have children that are?
There's
Or no?
2 houses that I have not met the renters at right now. And all the houses that we have purchased, we do not have anybody that we know that is at school age.
Okay.
I mean, they could have somebody in their house that we just haven't met with, or they haven't spoke about in conversations. I mean, I'm not going to say that we haven't met everybody in that household, but yeah.
So if somebody doesn't want to sell their house, are they just going to be sandwiched in between these other houses?
Yeah, so if somebody doesn't want to sell their house, and we've talked with a couple of the homeowners that don't want to sell their house, and again, first and foremost, I said, I want to be a good neighbor because I'm going to be your neighbor. I mean, I am your neighbor now, but at the time I wasn't. So I'm going to be a neighbor. I want to be a good neighbor. I want you to know what's going on, because I would hate to have a homeowner say, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Oh, I wish I would have known they were doing this, because I would have said, you know, take my equity in the house and put it towards the purchase of a new house. And that's where I want them to know that we're really willing to work with them to put that on the table. I mean, that's on the table with every homeowner on that street. And then if they want to keep their house, what we're looking at in terms of how the streets are currently designed to keep with the setback for multiple reasons. One, we already have beautiful mature trees on that street. Some have a really bad bark problem, but that's not something we can fix. But they have beautiful mature trees that we wouldn't want to disturb in that area. And then also, we want to keep with the setbacks for the house because we don't want it to look odd, if you will. So, I mean, we would still be at like that 15 to 20-foot setback on the front yard to set it back. So, again, a couple of the houses that aren't, there would be more of a yard as we get closer to those houses, but the houses that we know are not going to sell if we have to jump over them, like you said. Looking at maybe putting a townhome that's more of a flat use in there, so that way we can go a little bit wider and get that same use, but then you'd have those like one level condos on that side. So, we have had some people that said they don't want to move, and that's what we've done. We've gone and met with them individually, sometimes begging to meet with them, because again, we just want them to know what's going on, and hopefully you guys know and have worked with me at least enough that I'm not going to power play somebody into selling their house, and that's not what we're about. That's not what the Kim Group's brand is at all. But we wanted to more so make sure that they know what's going on. We're still in conversations with a lot of those, owners and homeowners, and to make it all happen. So, like I said, we wouldn't come forward with a project at this point in time if it wasn't for the TIF boundaries being discussed.
I want to go back to Trustee Carter's question, and Cheryl, you had a great point and a great question. I am committed to increasing population in the village, and the last thing I want to do is to bring in one income level and displace another. So I'm optimistic that we took advantage of the Home in the Heights money from Peoria County at $300,000. I'm very optimistic that if we can put a good plan together, we can go back to Peoria County and make a request for additional funds, because really what I'd like to do is to take some of these homes, repurpose them, and to identify parcels to move them to and recreate another more affordable opportunity for people to be first-time home buyers with some of those homes that you might demolish, that we might be able to purchase for a very minimal price.
Absolutely.
Okay, anyone else? Deb, did you have anything else you want to ask? Cheryl?
No, I'm fine right now.
Anyone else?
How many,
Go ahead, Trustee Mariscal.
how many parcels have you acquired thus far?
I'd have to go back and look. I did not bring that with me. But percentage-wise, about 60%, 60 to 70%. One we're in final negotiations with. Hopefully, it's signed and in my inbox right now for Phase 1. So at this point in time, we would have acquired enough to go forward with Phase 1 if we have the TIF.
Okay.
Or but for the TIF, to use the proper terminology.
Okay. Anyone else?
I had a question.
Yes, Diane?
For the flats that you were talking about, will those be less expensive
Yes.
than the other homes? So,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that if there were an elderly couple over there or something that had their home paid off and they didn't want to move, but they wanted to move into one of the flats, this is going to be less. Is it still going to be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or would it go down to like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, or how are the flats going to be set up?
So the flats would be, we'd have a different mix for that. But if they are not 3-bedroom, 2-bath, they couldn't take advantage of the Home in the Heights program. Okay. But they would be a significant reduction in cost, especially for being a flat and then being, whether it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Really, they would, 2-bedroom, probably 2-bedroom, 2-bath would probably be the lowest rooms that we would have, to be honest, because if you're talking 1-bedroom, 1-bath, we have that supply here. We have 2-bedroom, 1-bath here. We don't have 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I don't know why, but that second bath is kind of been forgotten over the years. But so that would be the lowest bathroom to bedroom ratio that we would go down on the condos. But a lot of the individuals that we've talked with that would be interested in that, they have, it's a husband, wife, and maybe they have a kid that's still home, or it comes visits from college, and then they want an office. So stuff like that they would still be interested in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home and condo.
Okay, and so what, the square footage on that will just be smaller? Is that where you're?
Yeah, it'd be a smaller square footage, smaller footprint.
And do you have any idea what you would charge for one of those?
Not off the cuff. Again, it depends on kind of that whole, what's the cost of the land and then the demo and all that. So those, we haven't defined the actual square foot of that layout, more so because our focus group that we're going to be doing to gauge that demand is going to be in the beginning of August. So we pushed our focus groups back to after this inducement resolution, because if this doesn't get passed, I mean, we don't move forward with the project. I mean, it can't financially work. I mean, we looked at trying to do townhomes on Kelly Avenue with the 4500 project, and we just couldn't make it work. So, I mean, really, we didn't want to go, because we spent a significant amount of time over the last 6 months meeting with people, talking with people, negotiating deals, and we have a lot of money out on the table right now. So if it doesn't get passed, we'll be assessing, do we want to buy these homes for rental, or do we want to walk away from the deal?
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Finally, I would just like to compliment you on bringing this project to us tonight, and I think it's a good project. There are concerns. I'm confident we'll be able to address those and to alleviate those concerns as we move forward. I struggled to come up with another example of where in the Tri-County area there has been a new housing development in an existing urban area. I know Pekin and East Peoria and the city of Peoria have had plenty of subdivisions come forward over the years, but I cannot think of one, and I will stand corrected, that has gone into an older existing neighborhood and a developer has proposed to do new housing. So I think it's very exciting. There may be others out there, I'm not aware of them. I don't think there are, but this is a great opportunity for Peoria Heights, and this process has worked very well. I think we did the right thing by deferring this until tonight to get more information, to allow the public to come and weigh in and hear their questions and their concerns. But again, the village is open for business, and tonight we're proposing to consider Ms. Kim's development proposal, but we're open for any other developers that want to come forward. We're here, we're willing to talk with you. So if the board is ready for the question, Madam Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Trustee Harn?
Aye.
Trustee Gett?
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal? Dan?
Nay.
Trustee Mariscal?
Aye.
Trustee Reichert?
Aye.
And Trustee Carter?
Okay, before I say aye, I want to make sure, what are we motioning or voting on? Because there's been so much, are we voting on?
Inducement.
The inducement.
2017?
This is the inducement resolution that commits a good faith effort on the part of the village to put the developer's proposed parcels in the TIF district.
Okay, aye.
Okay. All right, that passes with
5 to 1.
one dissent?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next, we would be at the discussion of the TIF boundaries. Trustee Mariscal?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to open up the floor for discussion of TIF boundaries.
Anyone want to weigh in on this?
Oh, yes, I do. That's probably my question anyways, is the boundaries. Okay, so the TIF, are we wanting to do a new TIF around there, or are we extending? What is the deal here?
Matt, you want to take that?
That's what we're here to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we extend the existing TIF, which was set up in, I believe, 2015, by the time this project comes online, they would have lost probably 3 years of that TIF benefit. So, and that's an option, just to extend it. But if we really want to maximize the potential benefit, it'd be in our best interest to create a new one. Same with Mr. Herman's project, the apartment complex, In the long run, I think it increases the amount of property tax revenue that the village could get back, because their project costs aren't going to go down. They're going to need what they need. So if we limit the life of the TIF, we limit the amount of money that it can create. So I think it's in the village's best interest to create a new one again, and that's my opinion, but I'd like to hear others' thoughts on that as well in terms of a new one versus an expansion of one.
What's the difference in the cost of expanding or?
I believe it's the
creating
same.
a new
I'm looking at Steve. I think it's the same, about $30,000 either way. So that's
$30,000 to either extend the boundaries or to create a new one.
Steve, you
Correct.
better come.
Problem with creating a new one because we're getting too many TIFs going on here.
Sure.
On the other hand, it kind of looks like this one is a little bit different from the other one in that there's more residential properties in this one. And the other ones are more commercial properties, the other TIFs. So I think in that respect, I might be more likely to agree that a new one might be better.
Well, if it's the same cost either way, and you get a better benefit of keep having more time, and we are increasing our population, I agree with you. I think that's a better way to go too, but I'll let the expert take
If I
it.
can-
Steve, why don't you tell us our options?
If I can address that, what I have said to this point is that you shouldn't expect that the cost to either amend TIF 1 and add property to it or to establish a new TIF will not exceed $30,000, okay, for the fees to create a new one or to expand the one you have. The reason I say that is because we don't know yet how big the area is that you want to add or create, and it will depend on the number of parcels and how large it is as to really what the fee will be. Because we, as part of the study that the village has to undertake, we have to go examine every lot, block, and parcel within the area. And so it could easily swing $5,000 to $7,000, you know, but I would, it just depends on how big it is. But the process is the same. If you add 1 square inch to an existing TIF district, you go through exactly the same steps, the same timeline, the same process as you do to create a new one. So if you're going through the effort, from the village's standpoint, if you're going through the effort to add this much area to a TIF district one way or another, then if you're going to spend the money and go through the effort of doing it, you just as well get the full benefit of what the act will allow, which is the 23 years. From a development standpoint, the apartment building, it could probably make it if we expanded TIF 1 to include that area. I say make it as far as making the numbers work.
Right.
The project that is being proposed for Samuel Avenue, I'm not so sure that it would be feasible because you have 22 years of TIF 1 revenue years left because we just created it in 2015.
Right.
But by the time you get these homes built on an as ordered or as sold basis, which could be over a 3, 4, maybe longer period, I don't know, we hope not. But if it's 3 to 5 more years to get it built out, then you've lost that much more time in TIF 1, and there isn't then enough remaining life of TIF 1 to amortize out the costs to reimburse from the increment to make the project feasible. So it doesn't sound like much on the face of it when we say there's only 2 or 3 years difference, but it could end up being a significant difference if you do a new TIF and you have a fresh 23 years to work. It's actually 24 years of revenue because of the 1-year lag in when properties are assessed and when the taxes are collected. The last year of a TIF district is the 24th year, but the last levy year for a TIF district is the 23rd year payable in the 24th year. So you've got just that much difference that could weigh pretty heavily on whether a project like the Samuel Avenue project would be successful or whether you would do it. So I don't know. That's part of the but-for TIF statements that were made in the letter that's attached to the inducement resolution. Okay, but the process is the same. So the TIF 1 and TIF 2 that we established for you we quoted at $30,000 each, but because we ran them concurrently, the professional fees for each of those ended up being $27,500, I think, for each one. And so when we first began talking about potentially expanding TIF 1 or a certain area that's fairly manageable, whether it's the uptown here and a little bit each way, I was anticipating that the fee would probably be closer to 20, okay? But depending on where you end up with the size of the area, if it gets bigger, I just needed to give you a range and say I wouldn't expect it to exceed 30, because that's kind of the basis upon which we established the other 2 TIF district areas. Does that help? I hope. Explain? Okay.
Anyone else? Cheryl, does that answer your question?
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of sorted. Well, it's all kind of sorted because, you know, and the inducement resolution is not an agreement. It's just a non-binding affirmation that the village is somewhat supportive at this point of the concept of the project, but it allows the developer then to begin to undertake those studies and incur the additional costs of determining what all the infrastructure requirements and the costs may be to develop this site. And those costs, if you proceed and create the TIF and enter into an agreement later with them, you would be able to come back and count those expenses as TIF-eligible expenses from the date of the inducement resolution. Otherwise, inducement resolution is non-binding. It's not an agreement to do anything but make a good faith effort to look at the area to include those properties in a TIF area if you establish one.
So I would recommend that, at least for now, we simply look at the parcels identified by the developer. Matt has suggested that the Village Hall be put in a TIF, and I concur that that probably needs to be done. This is the only formal development before us, but there are other informal talks we've had about other developments, commercial, in Peoria Heights, and those may need TIF help as well. But for now, I would just say that we move forward and look at the identified properties by the developer and consider those the boundaries. And I would also state myself, if the board starts talking about extending this TIF much further south into the neighborhood, I would want to either recuse myself or state that I want my property drawn out of the TIF as well. I'm not close, but if we start talking about putting this whole neighborhood in the TIF and go all the way south to Marietta, then I want to make sure that I would have my property drawn out as well, like Trustee Harn stated.
So the discussion on the TIF boundaries, I mean, do we have to vote on that tonight?
No.
It's just a discussion.
Just a
and
discussion.
If there's a consensus, if everybody's in agreement that we're just going to, for now, talk about the proposed parcels in the TIF district for tonight only and move forward, as long as that's a consensus, we can do that, and Steve would understand that, and Matt would understand that. So I guess unless someone objects or has a different idea, that's what...
It's just a study area. It's just an area to study at this point, and then it'll give me more information so that we can provide you with a proposal for what it's going to take to move forward.
Just in case somebody else comes up and says, I want to develop too, and we can, that way we're not locked in on the area. That way we can,
the only point
we're
at
still
which,
open, we're in a...
It's very fluid up until the point when you get more into the statutory process where you've already given notice for a public hearing, which requires certified notices to go to all the taxpayers in the area. You don't want to add anything to it at that point. You can take things out through the entire process right up until when you actually establish the TIF area. You know, so you've got 6 or 8 months to kind of talk about that. But so you've got plenty of time right now. If you decided you wanted to add something here and there, you can do that.
And again, I think we're seeing things accelerate, so there could be more come before us. But for right now, then I'm hearing that we all want to move forward with these identified parcels.
Yes.
And only those for right now.
I think a good starting point is to look at the project-driven areas that you feel would benefit or could be induced, incentivized to proceed if they're included in a TIF area.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, that was for discussion only, no action necessary, so we would be at item 10, approval of the bills. I would entertain a motion to pay the bills.
Make a motion to pay the bills.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I do. Any question on any of the bills or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Harn.
Aye.
Trustee Gett.
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal.
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal.
Aye.
Trustee Reichert. And Trustee Carter.
All right, next is an executive session. We do have an executive session scheduled. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session
So
for
moved.
the sale of property. I have a motion and a second. So we will come back here to adjourn, but we will not conduct any further business when we come back here other than to adjourn. So, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on that?
Trustee Harn.
Aye.
Trustee Gett.
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal.
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal.
Aye.
Trustee Reichert. And Trustee Carter.
All right, so we're headed to executive session. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.
I can't